If we had to pick one word to describe people's mood when it comes to their finances, let's just say it wouldn't be upbeat.
The feeling is that people can't get ahead, that no matter how much they feel like they're working, or no matter how hard they're trying to save or to pull back, they just can't get ahead of what they feel is just the cost of living continuing to put pressure in their day-to-day lives.
So people don't feel great. But in reality, could we be better off than we think? Hi, I'm Paul Havershood. Welcome to The Cost of Living. So the prices we pay for stuff are way up. So that's not awesome. But you know what else is up? Our wages. Yeah, really. Also today, what's a women's money club, you ask? Well, it's a club where women talk about money. And more of them are popping up all the time. Up first, the war in Iran, the global economy, and even more uncertainty about where things go from here. Now that we're a few days into the war in Iran, the picture is starting to get a little clearer. The U.S.-Israeli operation could last 4 to 5 weeks or longer. This is according to Donald Trump. But at this point, the situation is still changing by the day for people in Iran, the region, as well as the global economy. Stephanie Carvin is a professor of international affairs at Carleton. She's here to talk about where things stand now. Stephanie, hi.
Hi, great to be back on the show.
Well, thanks for being here. So Stephanie, when obviously what's happened with Iran came on very suddenly over the weekend. Right now, what are you watching at the moment? What are you watching most closely?
I think to a certain extent, it's all about Trump. The issue with Trump, of course, is that he's mercurial and he's happy when things go well, they go fast. This is not going to be that. This is something that he now says is going to take 4 to 5 weeks. It is going to clearly have an impact on the global markets, the stock market, which of course is an indicator that he's always watching. So I guess I'm waiting to see is, will he have the strategic patience to achieve whatever goal he's trying to achieve? That's the other part here, is we don't actually know exactly what the goal is. But presumably, if the goal is to either force Iran into some kind of an agreement or perhaps a full-on regime change, then is that going to be something that Trump is going to hold on to and be able to wait for, even in the case of a lot of uncertainty, the loss of American troops' lives, and other chaos throughout the region?
What about the potential for escalation right now? What are you watching for there?
Right. So what we're seeing, of course, is Iran, they see themselves as fighting for survival. And as a result, they're kind of doing everything they can to sow as much chaos as possible. And one of the things there is, I think they're trying to get other regional countries to put pressure on the United States to stop the mission. And they're doing that by targeting the infrastructure and tourism industry in a lot of these countries, particularly Dubai. We've seen these very dramatic pictures of missiles and drones having hit buildings in Dubai. But also oil fields have been targeted in Saudi Arabia. Military bases in countries are being targeted. But when those missiles miss, they hit civilian infrastructure, they hit civilian buildings. And so I think because of the chaos that this is causing and the economies of regional countries, that the hope is, I think, on the Iranians, is that they're trying to show, look, we're dragging you into this. You may not want to be a part of it, but you're going to be. So I think that's the real risk here, is that they end up trying to, sow as much chaos as possible. And either what you're going to see is some of these other countries potentially get involved. I mean, I think there'd be a pretty serious escalation. But to what extent then do they try to put pressure on Trump to either de-escalate and return to diplomacy, or to, try to wrap things up quickly?
What about the oil piece of this? If we look at it from the Iranians' perspective, where does oil fit into their response and how they see that oil potentially playing into ending this?
I think to a large extent, our economies depend on oil, right? We're still oil dependent economies. And so there's a couple of things they're trying to do here. One is, as I mentioned earlier, they are trying to strike at oil infrastructure in a lot of these countries. We have seen, again, in Saudi Arabia, one of the oil fields got hit, apparently by debris, but information's conflicting on that point. So again, just trying to shut down the flow of oil, which is going to spike the oil prices, which is going to obviously hit the economy. We've already seen oil prices immediately jack up all around the world. And I think the second way they're trying to do it is by controlling the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, which is this very strategic, naval route that's being taken. So if you can't get the oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and of course, if the infrastructure is being damaged in the first place, then yeah, you're basically causing kind of I don't know if oil shock is too strong of a word, but definitely a spike in prices that's going to hurt not just the United States, it's going to hurt globally.
What I'm curious about is for decades and decades and decades, at least if you just think about the Strait of Hormuz and oil markets, that was the thing that was really the boogeyman for oil markets. So the U.S. isn't going to go into Iran because of the Strait of Hormuz. It's such a choke point for oil. And now they have. As you watch that happen, what are your thoughts when it comes to the Strait in particular?
It's hard to even forecast about the Strait of Hormuz and all these other attacks regionally, because we don't know really what the end state of this is going to look like. When is Trump going to lose his patience or lose his interest? When is he going to say, okay, that's enough? Or is he actually going to try and do a full-on regime change, which is going to be a lot harder than dropping a bunch of bombs. So there's another thing that could impact not just the Strait of Hormuz, but also, and not just the shipping there, but also the countries themselves and how vulnerable they are to attack.
If we look at the economic piece of this again, you'd mentioned that economic forces can put some pressure on the U.S. They could pressure Iran. I mean, it's definitely at play. How do you see the economics of what's going on right now affecting what the U.S. chooses to do over the next number of weeks?
2026, we are in the first week of March, right? And already we have seen, a decapitation in Venezuela, an attempt to assert U.S. dominance of that country. We've seen an oil embargo of Cuba, which has effectively brought that country to its knees. And in fact, there may even be a humanitarian crisis right now. And now we have the strikes about Iran. Let's even forget the Greenland thing, right? So all of this is happening, not to mention the war in Ukraine, not to mention other wars that are going on in Africa right now. It is the most chaotic time that I can remember. And the pressure on the economies around the world is going to really be felt as a result. Because I think, if you had told me in December of, 2025 that any of this was really going to be happening, I think I would have not believed you. And so as a result of that, I think that there's just, the requirement now to factor in so much uncertainty in anything that you do, anything you try to build, any place you try to go is going to be really a real problem. And I think this is going to be something that's going to characterize the rest of 2026, so long as Trump feels emboldened by his perceived success, or at least the success that he perceives. So again, I think the next 4 to 5 weeks are going to be really important to see where all this goes. But the impact of the markets may factor into his decision, but I think it's going to be a fairly bumpy ride.
Where does that leave Canada? If there's all this instability in the world right now, it seems like there's more instability, as you're saying, than there has been in quite some time. As Canada, what do we do in this world of more instability?
I think one of the advantages Canada has, so let's put a really thin silver lining on this really pretty dark cloud. I think what it means is as we see Mark Carney traveling the world and trying to build partnerships with new countries, our reliability can become a superpower, right? We could, go to these other countries and say, look, we're not going to go around starting wars. We're not going to go around and, you don't have to bribe us. You don't have to buy, Trump coin in order to get access to our markets. Help us develop the resources that we have and, partner with us. And our stability is going to be something that you can count on. So I think that's maybe the good news for Canada. The bad news is that it's really hard. I think if you're a Canadian company trying to do global business right now, right? Because you have all this chaos, all this uncertainty. Even if you're a tourist, like, if you were in Mexico, just at the end of last month, we saw what happened when the US put pressure on Mexico to take out a drug dealer. And yeah, I mean, of course, the tourists, I want to acknowledge the people there too. Obviously, those communities were highly impacted by what happened. But I mean, this just goes to show that making plans in 2026 is kind of a dangerous business, whether you're just trying to book a vacation, whether you're trying to make some kind of marketing deal, whether you're trying to, sell natural resources. It's going to be a challenge. And just factoring all this in is not something that I think can be discounted.
All right. Well, we will continue to watch and look forward to talking again as things unfold. Stephanie, thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie Carvin is a professor of international affairs at Carleton University. You know what's expensive these days? People. Anyone you pay to do something seems to cost more. A mechanic, a plumber, your barber. But why? Well,
there's been virtually zero improvement in productivity of barbering in over 100 years, right? At least 100 years. And it still takes the barber almost as much time to cut my hair as it did 50 years ago, except I have less hair. Other than that, it takes the barber just as long to cut my hair as it did 50 years ago.
But the price of that haircut is definitely not the same as 1975. Then again, prices for other stuff, your TV, your microwave, they're more in check. That's the Baumel cost effect. More on that next week. This is The Cost of Living. Listen to us on CBC Radio 1 or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Paul Haberstrood. If you ever have a sinking feeling like, I should be more up on my finances. Stocks, bonds, bulls, bears. What's a TFSA again? Well, you're not alone. And now more Canadians, especially women, are doing something about it, with a little help from their friends.
For a good chunk of her adult life, Jessie Dollamont was kind of lousy with money.
When you're a student for so long and a musician for longer, you're mostly just like, I have money, better spend it. I might never have any money again.
When she graduated, Jessie got a job as a music therapist and started making a steady income. She wanted to pay down her debt and save for a house, but didn't really know where to start. Then a friend who was
tired of being on the cusp of always being broke
invited her to join her money club.
We're kind of like a book club.
They meet up about once a month in Calgary, usually at someone's house. And yes, sometimes there's wine. But instead of talking about fiction, they talk about finance, and they call themselves CGFL.
Which stands for Chicks Get Financially Lit or Literate.
All over Canada, chicks are getting financially lit. There's Women and Money Montreal, Yukon Women's Money Club, and then there's Canadian Ladies Money Club with 12,000 members online.
Some people would look at that and be like, oh, these are, how to save money on groceries and, coupon clipping. Oh, no, we go far beyond that.
Jolie Vigers is a financial coach and chartered professional accountant. She runs the club on Facebook. She says it's a place for women to ask detailed questions about personal finance.
How do we understand our investments? What's an ETF and how do I get into this? Because I'm hearing all about it.
Jolie will sometimes answer those questions, offer her expert advice for free, but she says it's the club's members who often have the most helpful and interesting responses.
Someone has been there and done that before. And so these lived stories, you can't get this anywhere else. Sometimes they're very wild. Like someone will ask something about sheep farming and I'm like, who is going to know that? And somebody does.
Catherine Judge is a senior economist with CIBC. She says the rise of women's-only money clubs makes sense because women are making more money.
Now what you're seeing is women are increasingly represented in higher paying positions, reaping higher wages.
The wage gap between women and men is shrinking. According to Stats Canada, over the last 2 decades, hourly wages for women have grown at a faster rate than for men. A survey from CIBC estimates that in the next few years, Canadian women could control nearly $4 trillion in assets. A lot of that will be inherited from parents and also
Women tend to get married earlier in life and they tend to be younger than men. So that means at the end of the day, they may control more wealth if they outlive their partners.
Since joining a money club, Jessie Delamont has paid off all her debt and bought a house.
And I felt so confident when I entered into that, just kind of understanding the language on a mortgage agreement, understanding what that interest actually meant.
And she has a whole new group of girlfriends to hang out with.
Our most recent gathering included a baked potato bar. So it's like we made baked potatoes and then everybody brought a topping.
So maybe it's time to change the name of the money club from Chicks Get Financially Lit to
The Baked Potato Babes. We're cooked.
For the Cost of Living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
So, Jen, we've been feeling the effects of inflation for like a while now, but it can still, when you're in the store, be a shock to the system.
Oh, yeah. Usually at the grocery store, I'll be walking along, then I pick up the grapes, then I put the grapes back down. I'm like, what are we, the Rockefellers?
I mean, you're draped in diamonds right now.
All
They're
the
lovely.
time. But I think it's fair to say that Canadians are not happy with prices.
This small amount of stuff just came to $218. How?
We hear about it on the news.
A large majority of Canadians are eating out less due to the rise.
Even in the House of Commons.
Taking responsibility for the cost of living crisis they created, the Liberals spend their time.
She says cost of living crisis, but then, you look at what's happening to inflation and go back a couple of years, it's actually gone back down. It's around 2%, which is kind of a sweet spot.
That's what the numbers tell us. But as for how people feel, that's a different story. David Coletto is with the polling company Abacus Data. He surveyed Canadians a couple of months ago, and he asked them, how bad do you think things are right now? Here's what he heard.
The feeling is that people can't get ahead, that no matter how much they feel like they're working, or no matter how hard they're trying to save or to pull back, they just can't get ahead of what they feel is just the cost of living continuing to put pressure in their day-to-day lives.
2/3 of the people that he surveyed said the cost of living has never been as bad as it is right now.
So that is 2 out of every 3 Canadians. They think that things right now are like historically bad.
But here's the thing, Paul. We may be overreacting.
Huh. Because?
Because according to the data, Canadians are actually doing better today than we were a decade ago. Claude Lavoie has been looking at the numbers. He's an economist and former policy analyst with the Federal Department of Finance.
When you look at the data, and again, I'm not the only one that look at those data, we see that people income, wage, and things like that went up faster than the price in whatever period you look at.
So he just said their wages are going up faster than prices.
Yes. In the last 10 years, prices have gone up 30%, which is a fair amount, but wages have gone up even more. In the last decade, the median hourly wage has gone up by nearly 40%.
So that basically means that on balance, we are more than keeping pace with price increases. I mean, is that across the board?
That goes for all age groups and income levels. While over that same period, Canadians have also gotten wealthier. If you look at net assets, housing, investments, that kind of thing, they've gone up in value.
People's financial wealth has increased, and again, in every income decile. And it's not only
even Canadians who don't own houses, their savings have gone up too.
So when you look at the data, it's difficult to say that, there's an issue.
Okay, so he's looking at the data and what he doesn't see as a big cost of living issue. But at the same time, that's for people whose wages have kept up with inflation. If your wages have not kept up with inflation, then this is not a good time.
Yes, this is not to discount that at all. Some people are struggling in this country. We've seen a spike in food bank use in the last few years. Claude isn't trying to sweep that under the rug. What he's saying is that there's a disconnect between the prevailing feeling that we're in a cost of living crisis and what the numbers show.
Okay, so if this isn't a by-the-book crisis, why do so many people feel like it is?
There's a few ways to explain it. One is just how inflation is calculated. The overall rate is based on the Consumer Price Index, which includes all kinds of stuff like the price of gas, furniture, food. And prices on some of those things, like gas or cell services, have cooled off.
But if you think about how we, sign up for a cell phone plan, we lock that in maybe for like a year and then we don't think about it too much.
Right, but we buy groceries every week. And food prices are still going up faster than a lot of other things.
And so when you're like, carton of blueberries is $8, that's the type of thing that makes you think that inflation is running hot.
Exactly. And David Coletto says, for many of us, this is a new experience.
If you're under the age of 40 in this country, you have not really lived through a moment of rapid inflation.
Well, yeah, the last time that prices really spiked was the early 90s. That's more than 30 years ago. And if you're younger, for a lot of people's entire adult life, inflation, this is as bad as it's been.
Yeah, and inflation isn't the only thing we're dealing with. We've got a trade war going on with the United States, and AI is promising to take all our jobs. It can be unsettling.
All the uncertainty in the world makes us far more defensive, very zero-sum game. And so the cost of living becomes this proxy in this moment for not just I can't afford it, but will I be able to in the future because of all these threats that exist around me?
Basically, he's saying, we're dealing with a lot of stuff.
Right. And I spoke to Connor Lane about why this might make us feel pessimistic. Why are we so focused on price increases, but we ignore the fact that salaries and savings are also going up? Connor is with the Decision Lab in Montreal, and he actually points to a theory in behavioral economics, which is known as loss aversion.
When we have something positive happens to us, we kind of take it in stride, but we're much more likely to perceive something negative happening to us as something we remember and something that's very psychologically stressful for us.
So if you're thinking about your finances, right, you might get a raise, your salary goes up, you feel good about that for a week, but when you get dinged at the grocery store, it just really sticks with you.
So we're kind of like negative Nellies
yes.
as a species?
Yes.
All right. What about, do you know the song that goes you gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative?
Don't mess with Mr. In Between.
Right?
Yes. But, prices aren't the only thing getting us down. Another factor at play in how we're feeling is social comparison. We have a tendency to judge how well we're doing based on how others around us seem to be doing.
If you're not making as much progress as your peers or as your parents did at this age, even though you're moving forwards slower, it doesn't feel like you're moving forwards because relative to where your expectations are, you're either treading water or you're moving backwards. And I think especially with young people, we kind of get a twofer in that we have living standards rising more slowly than our parents, but we're also all on social media. So we see this kind of fake vision of the people who are doing great.
So comparison, as they say, is the thief of joy. But Jen, again, some people are in a tough spot right now. If you look at median wages, they've outpaced inflation, but that still leaves around 30 or 40% of the population who is not getting ahead or even falling behind.
True. Everyone's individual experience will be different. The point that Claude and other economists are making is that this idea that we are in a collective cost of living crisis overlooks some of the facts.
Like wages, and that wages have gone up.
And so has overall wealth. Like if you look at house prices, for example, which a lot of people are concerned about, if you own your home, you've probably gotten richer in the last decade because of rising house prices.
Even if you don't feel like you've gotten richer.
And that perception matters for a couple of reasons. For one, it might make people pull back on their spending. Like we become so pessimistic about things that we put off buying stuff and just keep our money in the bank.
And then that is something that is real, because if consumer spending drops because you have this kind of feeling, then that does put the country at risk of like a real recession.
David Coletto says there's also a risk for governments here.
Well, look, I think real and perceived inflation are government killers.
David asked Canadians what they think the federal government should be focusing on right now. Cost of living is number one. Like things like healthcare, our relationship with the U.S. don't even come close. For Canadians, it's all about affordability.
And so it remains a point that governments have to constantly be showing that they're listening, that they're empathetic. And frankly, there's almost nothing they can do. It's why I think the Carney government recently moved to increase the GST rebate, what they described and called like forget the exact word, the grocery rebate, right? Or making groceries more affordable, even though most groceries don't have HST or GST on them.
So if people aren't happy, that can put pressure on governments to act.
And they might end up spending time and money solving a problem for everyone when it's really only a problem for some.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you're fighting the right battle.
And there are a lot of battles to fight with the economy right now in Canada. We've, fixed the productivity problems, boost the GDP. Those things will raise our standard of living.
That's all going to take some time.
Yeah, it sure is.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
Got to accentuate the positive.
You've got to accentuate the positive. Eliminate the negative. Latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've got to spread joy up to the maximum. Bring gloom down to the minimum.
That's all for the show. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Jenny DeRosio, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Jeff Kynock. I'm Paul Haversrud. Thanks for listening.
Latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between.